The sound of packing tape being pulled stretched out with a harsh ripping noise, tearing through the eerie silence of the old mansion. It was the only sound echoing in the vast living room, a place that had once been filled with Anna's piano music. Thomas did not cry. Ever since the moment he lowered his wife into the grave 3 days ago, he had not shed a single tear. Instead, he packed. He sealed each cardboard box with the cold precision of a machine, as if he were closing a finished case file rather than boxing up the keepsakes of the woman he had once shared his bed with. Kevin, only 7 years old, stood pressed against the heavy oak door, his swollen eyes fixed on his father's rigid back. He hugged his old teddy bear tightly, feeling as though he had been abandoned in the middle of an icy desert. "Don't just stand there staring at me like that, Kevin," Thomas said without turning around, his hands still methodically taping boxes. "Take these boxes out to the car. The moving company will be here early tomorrow." Kevin stepped forward, his voice trembling, pointing at the box on the table. "But, Dad, those are Mom's scarves. She really loved them. Can't we keep just one?" "One." Thomas stopped. He turned around, his sharp gaze boring into his young son. "For what, Kevin? So they can collect dust and remind us of what's gone?" He picked up the box and slammed it down onto the floor. "Your mother is gone. And the best way for us to move on is to erase these old remnants. I'm selling this house. We need a new beginning, clean and orderly." "But this house. It doesn't want us to leave," Kevin whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the dark wood-paneled wall behind his father. "It's holding us here." Thomas let out an exasperated breath, straightened up, and strode quickly toward Kevin. His shadow fell over the boy. "Not this again. What did I tell you about those imaginary stories?" "I'm not imagining it," Kevin shouted, a weak but desperate resistance. "I hear breathing, Dad. Inside the walls. Last night I even heard footsteps. Someone is here with us." "That's the old plumbing, Kevin," Thomas snapped, his voice echoing through the empty room. "Or it's your mind being overly affected. The psychologist already said it's your defense mechanism. But I will not indulge this weakness." He bent down until they were face to face, lowering his voice, but making it even more threatening. "Listen carefully. If you mention breathing or ghosts one more time, I will send you to a boarding school in Switzerland by next week. I need a mature son, not a delusional child. Do you understand?" Kevin nodded, tears spilling over. He did not dare say another word. He knew his father would do it. That night, while Thomas was busy on the phone with a real estate agent in his study, Kevin secretly slipped down into the basement. This was the only place his father had not yet gotten to. The damp smell and the familiar scent of his mother's lavender still lingered there, making him feel a little safer than in his empty bedroom. Kevin sat down on the cold tiled floor, fiddling with his small red toy race car. "Mom, I'm really scared," he whispered into the empty air. The toy car slipped from his hand, rolled quickly across the slanted floor, and disappeared into the narrow dark gap between the old washing machine and the rough brick wall. "Oh no," Kevin gasped in panic. He lay flat on the ground, trying to squeeze his small arm into the pitch-black gap to retrieve the only toy he had left. His fingers groped through dust and cobwebs. He couldn't feel the car. He stretched himself further in. Suddenly, his fingertips touched something flat, icy cold, and smooth. It didn't feel like plastic from the toy car. It wasn't brick or stone either. Kevin frowned, gripped the object tightly, and pulled it out into the dim light of the bare bulb. The boy froze, his breath caught in his throat. Resting in his dust-covered palm was a smartphone with a turquoise case, cracked at one corner. It was his mother's phone. The phone that his father and the police had searched for over 2 weeks without success, and that everyone believed had been lost at the accident scene. Why was it here? Behind the washing machine? Kevin's trembling finger accidentally pressed the power button on the side. He held his breath. The black screen suddenly flashed the bitten Apple logo, then lit up the dark basement. Battery warning, 4%. Kevin's heart pounded as if it were about to burst out of his chest. He stared at the wallpaper, a photo of the two of them smiling brightly in the park last autumn. A chill ran down his spine from the phone, but curiosity and his longing for his mother overcame his fear. Dad was upstairs. He was alone with this secret. Kevin swallowed hard, his thumb trembling as he swiped to unlock the screen. The password was still his birthday. The phone unlocked. Right on the home screen, the camera app was still open, displaying an unsent video saved just 2 days before his mother died. The boy took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the play button. He didn't know that the next touch would change his life forever. Kevin's small thumb pressed down on the triangle icon. The screen flickered once, then the video began to play. The 4% battery indicator in the top corner turned a vivid red, like a threatening countdown timer. The image in the video shook violently. It looked as if his mother had hidden the phone in her coat pocket, with the lens only half exposed, capturing a dim, shadowy scene. But Kevin recognized the place immediately. It was the darkest corner of the basement, right behind the old washing machine, exactly where he was sitting, curled up right now. His mother's labored breathing echoed through the speaker, sounding strained, as if she were trying to suppress her panic. "All right, Anna. Calm down. You can do this," his mother whispered, her voice shaking with fear. "Don't let Thomas find out." Kevin's eyes widened as he whispered to the screen, "Mom? Who are you talking to?" In the video, his mother stopped in front of the brick wall stained with patches of dampness. She glanced around nervously, then raised her hand. The long, slender fingers Kevin had always loved now looked deathly pale under the flickering light. She knocked on the third brick from the bottom in a strange, deliberate rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Kevin held his breath. He lifted his eyes to look at the real wall in front of him. It was silent and cold. But in the video, something impossible happened. A grinding, screeching sound rang out, like stone crushing against stone. The brick wall. It was moving. A large section of the wall slowly slid inward, revealing a pitch-black opening, deep and bottomless, like the gaping mouth of the earth. "That's impossible," Kevin stammered, backing away until his back hit the washing machine. From inside that dark opening, a massive black figure stepped out. Kevin nearly screamed, clamping his hand over his mouth to stop the sound. It wasn't human. Or at least, it didn't look like any human he had ever seen. The black figure was tall and powerfully built, but its face was a nightmare. Under the dim light of the video, Kevin saw half a face covered by raised, dark red scars, contracted and pulling one eye downward, white and lifeless. The skin was rough like the bark of a dried, burned tree. It was the face of a monster stepped out of the most terrifying stories. But what made Kevin's spine go cold was not the appearance of the monster, but his mother's attitude. Instead of running away or screaming, his mother dropped to her knees on the floor. Trembling, she pushed a plastic food container toward that dark shadow. "Please. Please take it." His mother's voice rang out, sounding like a plea. "They don't know you're here. Thomas doesn't know. No one knows. No." The dark shadow stood motionless, heavy, wheezing breaths coming from its broad chest. It bent down, a huge hand covered with interlaced scars reaching out and snatching the food container. His mother looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't have much time left. I feel myself getting weaker every day. If I can't come down here anymore. Please? Don't hurt them." That. Kevin felt his head spinning. Don't hurt them. The 7-year-old boy wondered in absolute terror. Was his mother talking about him and his father? The naive thoughts of a 7-year-old quickly pieced the clues together in the most horrifying way. His mother wasn't sick. His mother was being controlled by this monster. She had been feeding it, offering food in the darkness in exchange for her family's safety. Maybe it was this very monster that had made his mother weak and die. In the video, the monster seemed about to say something. It reached its hand toward his mother. Kevin screamed at the screen, "Don't touch my mom. Stay away from my mother." But just as that scarred hand was about to touch his mother's shoulder, the phone screen flickered. The low battery icon blinked one last time and then went dead. Darkness swallowed Kevin. The phone was now just a black, useless brick in his hand. But the silence in the basement at that moment was the most terrifying thing of all. Kevin slowly raised his head, staring blankly at the brick wall in front of him. It was still sealed shut. But now he knew that behind those cold bricks was not soil or stone. There was a room there, and there was that thing. The boy trembled, backing away until he hit the foot of the stairs. He didn't dare turn his back on the wall. He was afraid that if he turned away, the sound, click, 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 would echo. "It's in there," Kevin whispered, his voice breaking with fear. "It's listening to me." The boy turned and ran frantically upstairs, leaving behind the darkness that was ready to devour the false peace of the house. Kevin burst into his bedroom, slammed the door shut and locked it, a meaningless action if the real danger was inside the walls. The boy threw himself onto the bed, pulling the blanket over his head, his hand still gripping the phone that had gone dead. The room sank into darkness, with only the dim yellow streetlight filtering through the gap in the curtains. Kevin held his breath, his ears straining to listen. He didn't dare tell his father. How could his father believe him? His father would say he was making things up again, or worse, if his father went down there to check and that thing hurt him the way it had hurt his mother, then what? "I have to keep it a secret," Kevin whispered, his voice trembling under the blanket. "You can't sleep, Kevin. Absolutely can't sleep." But the house had no intention of leaving him alone. Around midnight, that sound began. Not the whistling wind or the water pipes like his father always claimed. It was the sound of dragging footsteps. Creak. Scrape. Creak. Scrape. It came from the space between two walls, right behind Kevin's headboard. The movement was slow and heavy, as if someone were dragging a large body through narrow wooden frames. Kevin curled up, tears welling at the corners of his eyes. "Please go away. Please." He whimpered softly, not daring to make a loud sound. The noise stopped. Right next to the ventilation vent in the ceiling. Kevin froze. He slowly pulled the blanket down, revealing wide, terrified eyes staring up at the metal cover of the vent. In the darkness, he felt as if another eye was also staring back at him from above, through the slits of the fan grill. A soft click sounded. Something small, rectangular fell from the vent onto the wooden floor. Thud. Kevin lay motionless for a long while. When nothing else happened, a child's curiosity pushed him forward. He cautiously climbed out of bed, bare feet touching the icy wooden floor. He moved closer to the strange object. Under the dim moonlight, Kevin recognized it as a chocolate bar wrapped in purple foil. The almond chocolate his mother used to secretly buy for him whenever his father forbade sweets. Kevin stepped back as if he had touched fire. "Why?" he stammered, staring up at the pitch-black vent. "Why do you have this? Why?" A horrifying thought flashed through the 7-year-old's mind. This was bait. Just like the witch in fairy tales who used candy to lure children into the oven. The monster knew what he liked. The monster knew he was hungry and terrified. It wanted him to trust it. "I'm not eating it," Kevin whispered angrily at the wall, kicking the chocolate bar under the bed. "I know who you are. You took my mother." Only a deadly silence answered him. But Kevin knew it was still there, listening to every breath he took. The next morning, dark circles were clearly visible under Kevin's eyes. He tried to find a charger for the phone, but none of the cables in the house fit his mother's old charging port. He was completely cut off from the only piece of evidence. Just then, Thomas walked into the room, pulling a suitcase behind him. His face was tense and rushed. "Kevin, listen to me," Thomas said quickly while adjusting his tie. "The buyer wants an urgent meeting in the neighboring city to sign the papers. I have to leave right now and I'll only be back by noon tomorrow." Kevin panicked and rushed to hug his father's leg tightly. "No. Dad, don't go. You can't leave me here." Thomas pried his son's hands away and sighed tiredly. "Kevin, don't make this harder for me. I've hired Martha to look after you. She's a very reputable housekeeper." "But Dad," Kevin shouted, tears streaming down his face. "There's someone in the walls. Last night it dropped candy into my room. It's a scar-faced monster, I swear." Thomas froze, his eyes darkening with anger. He knelt down and gripped Kevin's shoulders tightly. "That's enough. I'm exhausted by these made-up stories of yours. Candy? You probably hid candy earlier and imagined it yourself. I'm not making it up. Dad, check Mom's phone. There's a video in it." Kevin rummaged under his pillow, pulled out the black, dead phone and handed it to his father. Thomas glanced at the powered-off phone and shook his head in exasperation. "It's out of battery, and I don't have time for this game. Listen, if when I get back you keep talking nonsense about monsters, I'll start the paperwork to transfer you to another school immediately. Behave and stay at home with Martha. Understood?" Thomas stood up and decisively walked out of the room. "Dad, don't leave me," Kevin screamed in despair. But the sound of the front door slamming shut downstairs was the only answer. A few minutes later, Martha, a middle-aged woman with a distracted expression and headphones always on, walked in. She looked at Kevin, chewing gum noisily. "Hey kid, I'll be downstairs watching TV. Don't cause trouble or bother me. Just stay in your room and play." Kevin nodded, backing into the corner of the room. Now, in this vast mansion, there was only him, an indifferent housekeeper, and that thing lurking behind the walls. Outside, the storm had turned into a wild beast howling in fury, whipping its scrawny branches against the mansion's glass windows as if trying to rip the house's chest open. The clock struck 2 a.m. In the living room on the first floor, Martha had fallen into a deep sleep on the sofa, her snoring blending with the blaring rock music playing through her tightly sealed headphones. She was completely useless to the outside world. On the second floor, Kevin was still wide awake. The boy sat curled up inside the cramped wardrobe, burying himself under piles of his father's old clothes to steal a bit of warmth. He was hiding here not because he feared the thunder, but because he feared the bedroom wall. Every time lightning flashed, he felt as if the crack in the wall was widening, waiting to swallow him whole. Suddenly, the light inside the wardrobe went out. The entire house plunged into thick, suffocating darkness. Did the power go out? Kevin trembled to himself, his teeth chattering. Aunt Martha? But there was no answer. Instead, another sound rose from the staircase. Not the slow, dragging scrape of the man in the wall, but the sound of rubber-soled sneakers moving quickly, lightly, and with calculated intent. Thump, thump, thump. Kevin clamped a hand over his mouth. His instincts told him this. Whatever was coming up the stairs was not the scar-faced monster. It was something else. Something far more dangerous. The door to his bedroom slowly creaked open with a dry groan. A beam of cold white light from a flashlight swept across the room, slid past the empty bed, then stopped at the pictures hanging on the wall. Well, a strange, hoarse voice rang out, tearing through the silence. "So Mr. Thomas goes away and leaves the house this exposed. Thought the security system was supposed to be top-notch." It was a man's voice. But not his father's. Kevin peeked through the crack in the wardrobe door. Under the jagged flashes of lightning, he saw the silhouette of a man dressed in black, his head completely covered, gripping a long, sharp metal object that reflected a cold gleam. It was Brandon, a professional burglar who had been watching this house since the day of the funeral. He knew that tonight there was only a child and a careless housekeeper inside. Brandon moved toward the nightstand, sweeping everything off onto the floor in search of jewelry. Crash! The picture frame shattered into pieces. "Damn it, there's nothing valuable in here," Brandon muttered, kicking the leg of the bed hard. He swung the flashlight around the room once more. "Hey, kid. I know you're not asleep. Where are you hiding?" Kevin held his breath, tears spilling over. He wished he could dissolve into the air. Brandon snickered and took slow steps toward the wardrobe, the only place left to hide in the room. "Playing hide and seek with Uncle, huh? Uncle doesn't like playing hide and seek." His black leather-gloved hand touched the wardrobe handle. Kevin squeezed his eyes shut. Bang! The wardrobe door was yanked open. The blinding beam of the flashlight shone straight into Kevin's face, making the boy scream in terror. "Ah! Dad! Help me!" A rough hand grabbed Kevin by the collar, dragged him out of his hiding place, and threw him hard onto the floor. "Shut up!" Brandon roared, pointing the sharp object in his hand at the boy's face. "Scream one more time and I'll shut you up forever." Kevin shrank back, his spine pressed tightly against the ice-cold wall, the very wall he had always feared. What do you want? Please don't hurt me." Kevin sobbed, raising both hands to shield his head. "I want money. Where's the safe?" Brandon crouched down, shoving his face close to Kevin's, his breath reeking of cigarettes. "Or I'll take you with me. Your dad will definitely pay a lot to get his precious son back, right?" "I don't know. My dad's not home. Let me go." "Your dad's away, kid." Brandon sneered, gripping Kevin's small arm and squeezing hard. "No one's coming to save you. The old woman downstairs is sleeping like the dead. Tonight, you belong to me." Despair engulfed Kevin. He looked toward the door, then back at the brutal thief in front of him. There was no escape. His father wasn't here. His mother was gone. But then, his back felt a wave of icy cold seeping from the wall behind him. A crazy thought flashed through his mind. If someone really was here, if that one took food from Mom, if that one gave him candy, then maybe. Brandon raised the sharp object to threaten him, preparing to drag Kevin away. In the moment of absolute terror, Kevin didn't call for his father anymore. He turned toward the dark wooden wall, gathered all his strength, and screamed, "Help me! Sir! Please help me!" Brandon froze, then burst out laughing in contempt. "Who are you calling? A ghost? You crazy little..." He didn't finish the sentence when a horrifying sound exploded, drowning out even the thunder outside. Crack! Boom! The earth-shattering boom shook the oak floor beneath Kevin's feet. It wasn't thunder, and it wasn't the wind outside. The sound came from right behind him, from the very wall he had screamed into in desperation. The entire decorative wall behind the massive bookshelf split open like an eggshell smashed apart. Plaster dust and wood fragments burst into the air, forming a white, hazy cloud under the flickering beam of the thief's flashlight. Brandon jumped back in shock, dropping the dagger onto the floor. He staggered backward, eyes wide, pointing the flashlight into the swirling dust, his voice breaking in terror. What the hell is this? Who's there?" From the dense darkness inside the wall cavity, a figure stepped out. Each of his heavy footsteps made the floor creak, menacingly. When the flashlight swept over him, Kevin held his breath. Silas, the man from his mother's video, stood there like a tower. In real life, he was 1,000 times more terrifying than anything Kevin had seen on the tiny phone screen. He was over 2 meters tall, wearing a worn, tattered firefighter's protective suit, stained black with soot. But what froze people in place was his face. The left half of his face was completely deformed, the flesh shriveled, raw red, and uneven like melted wax. One eye was stark white, lidless, staring straight at the thief. He looked like a nightmare crawling up from hell. What? What the hell are you? Brandon screamed, his limbs shaking uncontrollably. He fumbled to grab the dagger, trying to reclaim his aggression. Don't come any closer. I swear I'll kill you. Silas said nothing. He didn't snarl or shout. He simply stepped forward, placing himself between Kevin and the thief. His massive back completely blocked Kevin's view, forming a solid wall of flesh that protected the boy. Get out of the way! Brandon screamed, lunging forward in total panic, swinging the dagger straight at Silas's chest. Sir! Watch out! Kevin cried. Silas didn't dodge. He raised his massive arm and knocked Brandon's stab aside as if swatting a fly. His strength was so overwhelming that Brandon was thrown backward, slamming hard into the wardrobe. But the young, cunning thief quickly recovered. He realized the monster was strong but slow. He lunged again, this time aiming for Silas's side where the protective suit was torn. Stab. A dull, sickening sound rang out. Silas staggered, a deep, muffled groan of pain escaping his throat. Ha ha. You feel pain too, huh? Brandon laughed wildly, pulling the knife back to stab again. But Silas didn't fall. Instead, the pain seemed only to harden his resolve. His large, scarred hand clamped tightly around Brandon's wrist. Enough, already. Silas spoke, his voice hoarse and broken, like stones grinding against each other, sounding both terrifying and profoundly sorrowful. With a decisive twist of his wrist, Silas forced Brandon to drop his weapon. He lifted the thief clean off the ground and threw him to the floor, then quickly used the old length of rope he always carried at his hip to tightly bind the man's hands and feet. Every movement was practiced and decisive, not a second wasted. Kevin sat curled up in the corner of the room, his eyes never leaving the giant man who was panting in front of him. On Silas's shoulder, a dark stain was spreading rapidly. At that moment, the shrill wail of sirens sounded outside. The bedroom door burst open. The beams of police flashlights and the hallway lights flooded in, driving away the darkness. Police. Drop the weapon. Behind the two police officers came Thomas. He rushed into the room, his face pale with worry. Kevin. Where are you? The scene before them left everyone stunned. The thief lay groaning on the floor, tightly bound. And standing in the middle of the room was a deformed monster, bleeding. Thomas saw Silas and immediately shouted, his protective instincts kicking in. Stay away from my son. You monster. Police, arrest him. He's dangerous. He's dangerous. A police officer raised his gun toward Silas. Don't move. Put your hands on your head immediately. Silas slowly raised both hands, offering no resistance. He turned his head and looked at Kevin one last time with his one remaining good eye. There was no threat in his gaze, only quiet reassurance. Dad, stop. Kevin suddenly bolted out of the corner. Instead of running to his father, the boy ran straight to Silas and clung tightly to the giant man's leg. Kevin. What are you doing? Get away from him. Thomas yelled, moving to pull his son back. No. You can't hurt him, Dad. Kevin sobbed, spreading his tiny arms to shield Silas from the police gun barrels. He's not a bad person. He saved me. Can't you see? He's hurt because he saved me. What are you talking about, Kevin? Thomas faltered, looking at the bloodstain on Silas's shoulder, then down at the thief hog-tied on the floor. Silas looked down at the child clinging to his leg. The distorted muscles of his face twitched slightly, as if he were trying to smile but couldn't. The boy is safe, he murmured, then collapsed to one knee from blood loss. Kevin turned to look at his father, tears streaming down his face, but his eyes were firmer than Thomas had ever seen. You have to believe me, Dad. Mom sent him. Look, he's the man in Mom's phone. The room fell into stunned silence. Thomas lowered his hand, staring at the deformed man kneeling on his floor, then at his son. A chill ran down his spine. The truth was slowly revealing itself, and it was more painful than any wound. The police sirens outside continued to wail, mixing with the groans of the thief now being handcuffed in the corner of the room. But all attention was focused on the center of the room, where Kevin still stood with his small arms spread wide, shielding the scarred giant. Thomas stood frozen, breathing hard. He looked at the wound on Silas's shoulder, then into his son's tear-filled eyes. The chaos in his mind screamed for a rational explanation. "Kevin, step aside right now," Thomas said, his voice unsteady but still trying to assert authority. "This is a crime scene. The police need to do their job. This man, he has been living illegally in our house." "No. You don't understand anything," Kevin shouted, his voice breaking in desperation. He turned to the police officers standing nearby. "Sir, do you have a power bank? I need to turn on my mom's phone. Right now." The officer looked at the boy, then at Thomas, questioning. Thomas, despite his confusion and anger, recognized the strange determination in his son's eyes. A gut feeling told him that if he didn't see what was on that phone, he would regret it for the rest of his life. "Do it." Thomas nodded slightly to the officer. "Let the kid borrow a charger." A power bank was plugged into the turquoise-cased phone. The seconds waiting for the screen to boot up stretched like centuries. Thomas looked at Silas. The strange man was still kneeling there, one hand holding his wound, his head bowed low, showing no intention of running or defending himself. He looked like an old stone statue, resigned and patient. The screen lit up. Kevin trembled as he unlocked it and tapped the unfinished video. He held the phone up toward his father. "Dad, watch it. Watch all of it." Thomas took the phone. On the screen, Anna's face appeared. His heart tightened. How long had it been since he dared to look at her image? The video resumed from where it had cut off due to the dead battery. Thomas held his breath. He expected to see his wife being threatened, but he didn't. Anna in the video no longer looked frightened as Kevin had once assumed. She was crying, but they were tears of gratitude. She looked straight into the camera, her eyes gentle and resolute, the eyes Thomas had forgotten since her death. "Thomas," Anna's voice came from the phone speaker, clear and warm, as if she were standing right beside him. "If you're watching this video, it means I'm no longer here. I'm sorry for hiding this from you, but I had no other choice." Thomas felt his hands begin to tremble. "Look at this man," Anna said, and the camera panned in close to Silas's deformed face. Silas in the video kept his head lowered, but Anna gently placed her hand on his scarred arm. "Don't be afraid of his appearance. Do you remember the horrific fire at St. Jude's orphanage 10 years ago? The fire I was lucky to survive." Memories flooded Thomas's mind like a storm. Of course he remembered. That was the day he nearly lost her for the first time. The firefighter who ran into the sea of flames, who used his own body to shield me when the ceiling collapsed. That was him. Silas. Anna's voice choked. Because he saved me, his face was destroyed. Because his injuries were so severe and his appearance deformed, he lost his job, was shunned by society, treated like a monster, and forced to live wandering in the sewers. Thomas looked up, staring at the flesh and blood Silas sitting before him. The man he had just called a monster was the one who had saved his wife's life? The video continued. Anna turned the camera back to herself, tears streaming down her face. "When I happened to see him rummaging through trash behind a restaurant last month, I couldn't let my savior live like that. I invited him here. The secret room behind the wine cellar was the only place he felt safe, away from the cruel eyes of the world. The Levin Resto." Anna took a deep breath, her voice becoming serious and urgent. "Thomas, you're always busy with work. I know you love Kevin, but you're not often at home. I was afraid. I was afraid that when I was gone, there would be no one to protect the two of you, so I asked Silas." In the video, Anna took Silas's large hand in hers. "He's not a monster. He's our family's guardian. He promised me he would be my eyes in the darkness, watching over this house, protecting Kevin and you, until his last breath." The screen went black. The video ended. The entire room sank into absolute silence. Only Kevin's muffled sobs remained. Thomas felt as if all the air had been sucked out of his chest. The phone slipped from his hand, falling onto the soft mattress. His arrogance, his coldness, the oversized ego of a successful businessman, all of it shattered in that instant. What had he done? He had almost sent the man who saved his wife's life to prison. He had let his son live in terror because of his own neglect. While he had been obsessed with contracts and plans to sell the house, this battered man had silently endured darkness, hunger, and pain to keep a promise to the dead. Thomas slowly walked towards Silas. His legs felt unbearably heavy. A police officer moved to intervene, but Thomas raised his hand to signal him to stop. He knelt down on the wooden floor, his expensive suit smeared with dust, bringing himself to eye level with the man society had cast aside. Silas recoiled, as if expecting punishment or rejection. His one uninjured eye watched Thomas with caution. "Why?" Thomas asked, his voice breaking, hoarse with emotion. "Why did you save us? After everything I said? I was going to drive you away." Silas looked at the wound on his shoulder, then over at Kevin standing beside him. His dry lips moved, and his voice came out with effort, slow and halting, one word at a time. "Because she called me human." That simple answer struck Thomas's heart like a blade. The tears he had held back for days, ever since his wife's funeral, finally burst free. He could no longer maintain his cold expression. Thomas lowered his head, his trembling hand resting on Silas's rough, scarred hand. "I'm sorry," Thomas sobbed, his shoulders shaking violently. "I'm sorry, thank you. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for keeping your promise." Kevin burst into tears and ran forward, wrapping his arms around both his father and Silas. In the storm-ravaged room, the three males, a child, a remorseful father, and a holy monster formed a strange circle. The darkness of misunderstanding had faded away. All that remained was the light of truth, painful yet healing. 1 month later, the for sale sign that had once stood prominently at the gate of the mansion now lay neatly inside a trash bin. In its place were rows of bright yellow chrysanthemums lining the stone path, signaling the arrival of a warm autumn. The house no longer carried the gloomy, cold aura of a tomb of memories. It was breathing, living again with the heartbeat of the people inside. Inside the living room, the sound of drills and hammers had stopped a week earlier. The wall separating Kevin's bedroom from the world of darkness had been completely torn down. There were no more secrets now. Instead stood a solid oak door, leading directly into a spacious room flooded with light. Thomas stood in the center of the newly renovated room. He looked up at the ceiling, where a large skylight made of reinforced glass had just been installed, allowing sunlight to pour straight down onto the wooden floor. No more darkness. No more dampness. "What do you think?" Thomas turned and asked the man standing quietly beside him. "I told the architect to design this ventilation system specifically for you. You'll never have to breathe suffocating air again." Silas stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, his tall frame imposing. He was no longer wearing the tattered firefighter's gear from years ago. Instead, he wore a carefully tailored butler's suit, fitted perfectly to his powerful build. Though his face still bore frightening, raised scars, in the neat attire and under daylight, he exuded an unusual sense of dignity. Silas touched the strip of sunlight on the wall. His hoarse voice rang out, no longer timid. "It's very bright, Mr. Thomas. I'm not used to this much light. I'm afraid this face will frighten people." Thomas stepped forward and placed a hand on Silas's shoulder, an intimate gesture he had never imagined making toward anyone, let alone a stranger who once lived inside his walls. We've talked about this already, Silas, Thomas said firmly but gently. The city's top cosmetic surgeon has agreed to perform reconstructive surgery for you free of charge. Don't you really want to reconsider? It could help you integrate more easily. Silas slowly shook his head. He raised his hand and touched the deformed flesh on his left cheek, where the flames had licked him 10 years earlier when he shielded Anna. The crooked corner of his mouth lifted slightly, forming a difficult but proud smile. No, sir. I will keep it. Silas replied, his eyes shining with pride. These scars. They are not ugly. They are my medals. Every time I look in the mirror, I don't see a monster. I see the moment I saved Anna. I want to remember that I lived a meaningful life. Thomas fell silent. Shame rose within him again, but this time it was quickly replaced by deep respect. You're right, Thomas nodded. They are the most beautiful medals. And from now on, you don't need to call me sir anymore. In this house, you are not a servant. You are family. Dad. Uncle Silas. Come out here, quick. Kevin's bright voice rang out from the garden, cutting through the conversation. The two men looked at each other, then stepped out onto the wide porch together. On the lush green lawn, Kevin was excitedly juggling a brand new soccer ball. The shy, frightened boy from a month ago was gone. His smile shone like the autumn sun. Uncle Silas. You be the goalie. Dad's terrible at kicking. I don't like playing with Dad. Kevin shouted, waving wildly. Thomas laughed, pretending to frown. Hey, kid, I can hear you. Silas stepped down the porch stairs, moving a bit slowly due to old injuries, but his back remained straight. All right, Kevin. Silas called back, his deep voice full of indulgence. But kick lightly. I'm old. No way. You're a superhero. A steel-skinned superhero. Kevin giggled, running over to hug Silas's leg before pulling him toward the makeshift goal formed by two chairs. Thomas sat down in a wicker chair on the porch and poured 2 cups of hot Earl Grey tea, the kind Anna had loved. He watched the scene before him, his son laughing joyfully beside the monster he had once feared. But now, he saw only a deformed man clumsily blocking shots to please a child. A gentle breeze passed through, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the garden. Thomas closed his eyes, feeling a peace he had never known during years spent chasing status and success. He knew Anna was somewhere nearby, smiling at them. After a while of exhausting play, Silas walked back toward the porch while Kevin continued chasing their newly adopted puppy. The large man sat down in the chair opposite Thomas, wiping sweat from his brow. Thomas slid the teacup toward him. Drink. Anna used to say this tea soothes the soul. Silas lifted the cup with his rough hands, breathing in the fragrant aroma. Master Kevin, the boy is very much like his mother, Silas said softly, gazing toward the child. Strong and compassionate. And stubborn too, Thomas laughed, taking a sip of tea. Then he set the cup down and looked Silas straight in the eyes. Silas. Silas. Yes? Thank you, Thomas said, his voice low and utterly sincere. Not only for saving Anna 10 years ago. Not only for saving Kevin from that thief. But thank you. For saving me. You taught me what it means to cherish what I have. Silas bowed his head, embarrassed by such solemn gratitude. I only did what needed to be done, though Thomas. I promised Anna. I am the guardian of this house. Thomas smiled and poured more tea into Silas's cup. No, Silas. You are no longer a guardian in the darkness. He raised his cup and gently clinked it against Silas's. The clear chime of porcelain echoed softly in the sunlit afternoon. Welcome into the light, my brother. Silas smiled a crooked smile on a scarred face, yet in that moment, it was brighter and warmer than any perfect face in the world. Deep beneath the ground of the past, painful secrets lay buried forever. All that remained was love, forgiveness, and a new beginning taking root in a house once filled with whispers. The story leaves a profound lesson: never rush to judge a person by a rough or flawed appearance. Sometimes, the most frightening monster does not lie in physical form, but hides within our own indifference and cold prejudice. Silas, with his deformed face but golden heart, stands as powerful proof that moral beauty always shines brighter than any external glamour. True happiness and redemption only arrive when we learn to set aside selfish ego and look into another's soul with compassion and deep gratitude.